Is this a kids game? Is this supposed to be a crossover between Disney and the Final Fantasy games? Games I didn't necessarily know about back in the day. What is this supposed to be about? Those were the questions that were on my mind, and surely those of many others, when Kingdom Hearts was first released on the PlayStation 2 in 2002, an event that probably no one could have foreseen, even with the huge popularity of Disney and Square's intellectual properties. With this game also having been released in HD on the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, not to mention the upcoming release of Kingdom Hearts 3, is it worth experiencing or re-experiencing the beginning of the Kingdom Hearts series? The story takes place across multiple worlds, with the enticing appeal of visiting them fueling teenager Sora's desire to leave his home of the Destiny Islands with his friends Riku and Kairi. But this thirst for adventure changes completely when the islands are invaded by creatures named the Heartless, and Sora suddenly obtains a weapon that can be used to combat them, the Keyblade. In Traverse Town, Sora meets up with Disney stalwarts Donald and Goofy, who are under orders from King Mickey to look for the Keyblade. What an unusual trio. In their search for King Mickey, Riku and Kairi, Sora and his new friends use the Keyblade to lock keyholes of various Disney worlds to defend against the Heartless. Their quest is complicated not just by the Heartless, but a group of Disney villains as well. This good versus evil story focuses on themes such as the heart/soul, destiny, and friendship. This, combined with the use of Disney characters, dialogue and worlds, comes across as a little cheesy, but the charm really makes it compelling to witness. The fact that the story was made more complex in development than the one intended for Disney's target age range, however, does mean that the story can be hard to understand as it goes on, in regards to character origins, connections, and motivations, not to mention some of the symbolism featured. But when a suitably interesting story features Disney worlds and characters that may make one smile and think back to their childhood, you probably won't care. Another small problem is the focus on the core stories from the respective Disney films, i.e. stopping Jafar in Aladdin, that, while appealing to childhood memories, tend to feel like filler storytelling regardless of the smallest of alterations to fit the game's story and its aforementioned themes. Alongside Disney characters, there are characters from the Final Fantasy series, such as Cloud, the Moogles, plus younger versions of Final Fantasy X characters. Fans may take issue with changes to these characters, such as giving the name Leon to Squall, the protagonist of Final Fantasy VIII.
I think you might have overdone it, Squall.
That's Leon.
But their appearances are a nice touch. It seems like there's a lot of fan service here, with many a cameo appearance for characters. But overall, the story and characters are good. Can the same be said for the way the characters in these many worlds look? Well, yes and no. Even on its HD release, the PlayStation 2 graphics are showing their age. The way characters are animated, especially in regards to their facial expressions and the way their mouths move, is not always up to scratch. Some of the backgrounds also look bland and repetitive in regards to texturing, but easily one of the best aspects of the game's graphics is, well, it's obvious. It's the way the look of the animated classics have been translated to a 3D world. The art style of each respective Disney film has been captured extremely well. Overall, the graphics are nice and colourful, plus the non-Disney worlds created specifically for the game don't look too bad either. And it wouldn't necessarily be a game developed by Square if the music weren't any good. The main theme. Traverse Town. And if you manage to get Under the Sea out of your head before, well, this game will put it back. While a large portion of the soundtrack consists of short repetitive loops, it flows well with what goes on screen, right down to the almost unnoticeable transitions to each world's differing battle tunes. The voice acting is generally good, with a few exceptions. It's good to hear many of the cast reprise their roles as the Disney characters. Plus, there are well-known talents behind the microphone, such as Haley Joel Osment for Sora. It is mostly difficult to know where to start with the gameplay because there are a variety of mechanics. You customize Sora at the start, with an attribute to excel in and another to lack in, as well as answer a series of mostly cryptic questions that determine the pace at which you level up. Then you explore the Destiny Islands and engage in 3D platforming, a deliberate inclusion for the game inspired by Super Mario 64. It is hard to deny that the platforming aspect is generally a problem, considering the lack of it in Final Fantasy games released prior to 2002. The best way to describe what it feels like is stiff with reliance on precision from short jumps while struggling with the camera. While Sora can grab onto ledges and even improve his jumping abilities, as well as other abilities, more on that later, you will fall off several times. In any case, there is plenty of exploration to be had in the game, as well as plenty of secrets. There are chests everywhere which contain items, equipment and ship parts, more on those later. There are side quests, such as looking for the puppies from 101 Dalmatians. More often than not, you will want to revisit worlds after you gain the ability to activate differently coloured Trinity marks on the ground, which generally lead to very helpful secrets. The catch is, you can only activate a Trinity mark if Donald and Goofy accompany Sora, not one of the other characters from the Disney world that has items and special abilities which are mostly used for combat. Combat is the thing you do most in this game. Well, one of the things anyways. Combat mostly boils down to locking onto an enemy and pressing the X button constantly until they are no more, with items and spells to help you. You will battle swarms of enemies as well as fight several bosses throughout your adventure. These encounters generally start off as stupidly easy, but can get more challenging later on, especially the optional bosses. Thankfully, you have magic spells, summons, and the aforementioned abilities to help you out. As with just about any RPG, your exploration and combat will give you more experience, which will expand your health point meter, magic point meter, and especially your ability points or AP. You can choose which abilities you want your characters to possess, provided they don't exceed your current AP limit. For example, Sora can use a quite powerful combo attack. This takes up 5 ability points, leaving less room for other abilities, and merely using it drains magic points. Apart from using healing items like potions and ethers, and even spells like Cure, defeated enemies will drop orbs, green for health, blue for magic, and yellow for money, or as it's spelled in the game MUNNY. As well as abilities, you can customize spells for Sora, i.e. the square button for Thunder, as well as the behavioral patterns of the AI buddies. That's right, Donald and Goofy, as well as any Disney character you may have in your party, do things by themselves, which has its share of problems. First of all, Donald and Goofy excel in magic and defense/special attacks respectively. This means that they will seemingly greedily use whatever potions and even ethers you leave in their inventory, even if you try to turn down that behavior in the pause menu. You can also customize the patterns and so on of the other Disney characters. Even that level of customization doesn't stop them doing stupid things such as failing to move away from a boss's powerful attack, so you may have to babysit them, even if it means using your own items and abilities to do so. Plus you may have to grind for money to buy these items. You will generally find you can't win without Donald and Goofy's help. Thankfully, battles are far from impossible to lose regardless of these frustrations. The Disney characters that are unique to specific worlds can be quite helpful with their attacks too, but it's probably best to keep Donald and Goofy with you, mostly for Trinity marks. Thankfully, anyone absent from your party levels up, something that wasn't readily apparent to me. So that's all good then? Actually, there are more problems. The aforementioned camera problems are not exclusive to platforming. With you locking onto enemies that surround you, the camera can get stuck or go wild, leaving you with next to no idea what's going on some of the time. And the worst part is that some of the places you will do combat in are narrow or are high up on some kind of cliff or platform, which makes retracing your steps after falling off all the more frustrating. Plus, you generally can't progress until you defeat all the enemies. Let me press that switch. Nope, you have to defeat all these Heartless, and by the way, be careful not to fall, it's a long way down. Combat is fun, though it generally consists of button mashing. But there's just something about doing that after coming home from a day of work that gives this game a level of appeal. The customization of items, abilities and equipment, including new keychains, are especially appealing, and are probably the best parts of the game. Platforming and combat make up the central core gameplay that you engage in each world. The method of progression of a game is generally linear, which is not a problem thanks to the side content and the occasional moment where you can choose a specific world to visit over another. The only way to travel to a world is via a gummy ship. You control the ship yourself in a rail shooter section that wouldn't be out of place in a game like Star Fox 64, where you shoot and avoid enemies and obstacles before you arrive at your destination. You can also customize your gummy ship using the various parts you collect on your adventure. You can make that vessel as powerful or as cute as you want. Maybe Chip and Dale and Geppetto would prefer it to be cute, though the interface could have been a bit more intuitive. But unfortunately, a contrast to Star Fox 64 has to be drawn in that the gummy ship sections are uninteresting, tedious, easy, and feel out of place in what is essentially an action RPG with platforming. Thankfully, you don't have to travel to worlds like this all the time, as a warp drive you obtain very early on automatically drops you off at worlds you've already visited, such as Traverse Town. Once you visit a world, you generally have to go around looking for the next story event or cutscene, which can be a bit confusing and tedious. Again, this is why some of the storytelling that's central to a world feels like filler. When you start off in Destiny Islands, you have to look for items to make a raft. That takes a bit of time before the story and battles gain momentum. In Wonderland, you have to collect pieces of evidence to convince the Queen of Hearts that Alice is not bad like the Heartless are. Not all worlds consist of ideas such as look for things or move from area to area until something happens, but sometimes there's only so much the charm of the characters and story can do to entertain the player while this happens, even if you are really into Disney. Add to this occasionally frustrating minigames and side content, as well as groan-inducing moments in battle. This could have been improved with better platforming, less erratic camera work, and a bit more depth, so Kingdom Hearts is far from perfect. In saying all this, the pros do outweigh the cons. Yes, including such moments where you may struggle to swim properly in Atlantica. You have to ask if this startlingly unique action RPG is really a mishmash of ideas and storytelling that may not add up to a cohesive whole. But you may ask more so about how this bizarre combination of Disney and Square/Final Fantasy stuff works so well. Even if you're not necessarily into Final Fantasy, or especially Disney, come on, who generally isn't, you will likely enjoy the story. The graphics and sound are generally of the level of quality one would expect from a game made by Square. The RPG mechanics are fun to play around with alongside the battling almost regardless of the constant button mashing. The game lasts for close to 30 hours, with more devoted to side content, customization and different difficulty levels. Playing it does give up the vibe that this is a first game of a series with potential for improvement, but you will surely feel warmth in your heart, so to speak, at the ending where you will be hard pressed not to play the games that followed. And with HD releases that feature more content, including the PlayStation 4 collection, that is more possible than ever. So, is it worth experiencing or re-experiencing the beginning of the Kingdom Hearts series, despite the aforementioned problems? The answer is yes.